2009 was another difficult year for the finance industry. That may be an understatement. Governments cracked down on executive pay and bailed out massive corporations and announced trillions of dollars in stimulus packages.
We learnt just how many trillions of dollars there even were in the world in existence. In the midst of all that, Australia managed to dodge the recession bullet. For a look back at the year in finance, Rod North is back with us from Bourse Communications. Rod North, hello.
Good morning, how are you?
Goodbye to all that. Soon we'll be able to say farewell to 2009. You will be a happy man.
Absolutely, and I can remember sitting here a year ago saying that 2008 was the financial services annus horribilis.
That's right.
So I've got to say 2009...
got worse.
Well, it actually got worse, but then it actually got better. So we have seen some fairly significant signs of recovery, but it's a slow process. And I mean, even with the recent GDP figures that came out, they were a bit of a surprise because they weren't as good as people expected they'd be. We've still got the December quarter coming up. And I think we've just got to keep a bit of an eye on things because recovery is a slow and gradual process, and sometimes it can throw up a few things that you don't expect.
Do you think 2009 will be the year where everybody finally learns their lesson and does behave gradually and allow that gradual growth?
Well, it's interesting about that because one of the things I was looking at in terms of what's happened, and particularly with the share market, it's interesting that all the bank shares have actually recovered over 100%. So I suppose that's probably going to mean that there's going to be some fairly significant bonuses paid again there. So I'm wondering whether we have learnt, Paul, a lot.
So the answer is no. No. And the resources stocks have gone booming again.
Resources stocks have boomed.
Super
the whole
is
market.
pretty much made up its shortfall. It's recovered from its lows. So it's just all good times again, isn't it?
It has been a remarkable recovery. I mean, we've seen the share market recover by about 52%, which is pretty unprecedented when you look back over history. That's
in such a relatively short period of time. I think that's the key thing. I mean, that recovery you would expect over a period of time, but the fall and the recovery was within 12 months.
That's exactly right. And I mean, one of the things that often happens too is the share market can often get ahead of itself a bit. So we have to really look and see. Companies will be reporting in February for the half year to the 31st of December. And it was interesting that one of the ones that sort of stood out yesterday was Qantas. Qantas came out saying that they thought their profit for the half year would be somewhere between 50 and 100 million. Which is a pretty significant increase about where they expected to be. I think the interesting thing about that too is that I had to laugh because I thought a lot of people have said what they're really looking for now, if Qantas is improving, is a hot brekkie again when you're travelling on economy.
I thought that was a switch to a healthier alternative. Was it just a cheapskate breakfast?
I think so. I think it was an economy drive. A lot of people have missed out on that hot breakfast rather than just a cereal and fruit.
At the risk of getting myself into trouble, here's some commentary. I tell you what, have you ever checked out the fat content of what they give you on those flights?
That's true.
That easier, cheaper snack apparently. Just turn it over. Just look at the fat content.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
My daughter's big into doing that. I'll have to fly with her somewhere so she can check that out.
I flew on the weekend and went to Sydney for the weekend and had some muesli. And
did you have a look?
I actually thought I'm thanking the airline that this is muesli and not a sausage. But I didn't eat their apples. I'm not sure.
You have many happy returns with the sausages sometimes. You've got to be careful about that.
Key moments for you then in 2009?
I think the key moments were really the sort of outstanding way in which the market had recovered, and the fact that I think a lot of people thought early in the year, particularly around March when the market bottomed, you know, a lot of people abandoned the fact that, you know, they thought they should continue to contribute to super because they thought the share market was going to go down. And I think people look back and think, well, gee, you know, if you're in investments, you've really got to stick in them because markets can recover. And I think over time we will gradually see the market recover, but we've got some pretty bumpy patches ahead, and you know, obviously with the interest rate outlook as well, I mean, there's a likelihood that perhaps that there may not be a February increase now because that GDP figure didn't look too good. We've got to wait for the December quarter and so forth.
Rod, at the risk of putting you on the spotty, who's the key performer this year? In sport, we'd be looking for the player of the year or something. And in America, it was Ben Bernanke, wasn't it, on the cover?
He was man of the year, person of the year according to Time. Who's yours?
Well, I think it's just investors that have maintained their resolve and haven't thrown the baby out with the bathwater.
That's another way of saying clients. Give us another answer.
Oh, look, you know, I suppose you've got to really say that both the Reserve Bank and the government have done a pretty good job, really. You've got to give them a tick in respect to that.
Do you say that reluctantly?
Well, I just think it's important in this sort of climate that you know, if a government can work with the Reserve Bank and business and so forth and manage to how we deal with what could have been a pretty nasty recession for us. I mean, Australia is really the standout in the whole world. And sure, things have been tough for a lot of people. I mean, I was out at Myers shopping last night. There weren't too many people around last night, and I think perhaps people are pulling their horns in a bit too. So we have learnt some things from the global financial crisis, and I do think that you know, if it's managed properly, it can show that the government and the Reserve Bank can work to you know, deliver you know, good result there.
Are you happy that the Reserve Bank is talking now about the fact that interest rates are heading into the normal zone, that this is about right, the setting for Australia's interest rates?
I think that gives people a level of comfort, because I think in October, when rates started to go up, people thought, oh, okay, we're back in that cycle again.
Yeah.
In November we got hit again, and then in December, of course, you know, so 75 basis points in a relatively short space of time. I think people were a bit concerned that was going to continue. So now that perhaps we've seen, you know, various commentary from the Reserve Bank about what the outlook is going to be like, I think it gives people a bit of a measure that, yeah, rates can sort of slow up for a while before we, you know, see them reach any higher levels. But equally, they can come down as well, if that's necessary. I mean, both monetary and fiscal policy can work, but it can work fairly dynamically and quickly. So it doesn't always necessarily mean rates are going to skyrocket up. If the economy turns sour, there's always the possibility that rates can come down as well.
So what's the share market outlook and the lead up to Christmas?
Well, I was rather hoping to see 5,000 before the calendar year end, Virginia, and we've only got 9 days to go.
You just love these milestones, don't you?
Wall Street is up last night, and often what we see at this time of the year is a substantial rally ahead of Christmas. So I've got 9 days, so I'm still thinking that if we get there, I'll be bringing that cake in to celebrate, but we will get to 5,000 at some point.
Well, we'll have
You
the
can bring
cake
cake in anyway.
We
I could do that.
Love cake on this show. What's your forecast for 2010 then?
I think it's going to be a bit slower. We will see the share market maintain its ground, but a lot of it's got to do with how companies can maintain and improve their earnings ahead, and the share market gets a bit ahead of itself. So I think, you know, if we see a 10 to 15% increase in the share market into next year, I think we'd be pretty happy. Interest rates to sort of end up around 4 to 4.5%, maybe 5%.
Maybe 5.
You know, later in the year,
Yep.
and I think that will sort of pretty much set things up for, you know, a stable economy for 2010.
Rodolphe, always good to see you, and thanks for bringing in your Christmas tie as well.
Thought I'd be a bit festive
nice.
this morning.
Yeah, nice bit of cheer there. Thank you.
Happy Christmas.
And to you. Now, still to come on ABC News Breakfast, the Greens leader, Senator Bob Brown.